This image will not move. This is a podcast. Anyway, in the current landscape of DPP OU, a lot of the player base has been saying that, yeah, Stall has been strong before, but right now it might be a little too strong. Latias ties these teams together really well, and Clefable is so good at walling everything, and Jirachi just does everything. Oh my god, what are we going to do about this? I personally think that the tier has more than enough tools to handle Stall. If anything, I think that... Actually, I'm not going to go further down that rabbit hole. I'm trying to not go on unrelated tangents as much. But I do think that these claims are exaggerated or nonsense, if you want to be mean. Because, yes, Stall is good. Stall has been good before. But I think these claims are nonsense, not just because the tier has so many tools to deal with it if you look for like 5 seconds, but also because it was not that long ago that the same exact Stall teams that are popular now. You got your Scarftar, maybe your Hippo, but Scarftar usually, then Skarm, Clef, Latias, Jirachi, a bulky ground like Nidoqueen or Gliscor, or more recently Quagsire, Gastrodon, or Rotom. It's not a bulky ground, but Rotom also gets thrown in there. And then there's other stuff I haven't mentioned, but yeah, it's a strong playstyle. Covers a lot. It's good. It's flexible. It offers a lot of both in the team builder and in battle. So you cover a lot of matchups. Yeah, it's a good playstyle. That's why it's used. That's why it's good. But it wasn't that long ago that the same players who are calling Stall insanely broken now were saying that Stall was nearly unviable, or that Clefable was not very good post Dugtrio ban. And, the metagame was trending away from that. I hate the word trending, by the way. It's in old gens, at least, I think it's an exaggeration of what actually happens. An exaggeration so great that it borders on being false, if not actually crossing into that territory. Anyway, so not much actually changed in terms of how these teams are structured. People started using Quagsire a little more. So, I'm going to be a little reductive because this annoys me right now. But somehow, post Quagsire boon and post more people realizing, hey, we can put Stealth Rock on Scarf T-Tart. Post those two developments, then somehow Stall has gone from nearly unviable in these players' eyes to broken, and we have to do something about it. We have to ban Jirachi, and then we have to ban Latias because of that, or we have to ban Clefable. So yeah, I think the Stall is broken claims are absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, but like I said, this video, or maybe I didn't say it, but if I did, then I'm going to repeat it, and if I didn't, then I'm going to say it. This video is not about how foolish the general player base is for thinking that Stall is overpowered, or the metagame needs to be changed in order to deal with it better. The metagame does not need to be artificially altered in order to loosen Stall's oppressive grasp on it. No, that's absolutely ridiculous. And frankly, I do think that... Okay, this is going to be a little harsh, but I do think, if you think that Stall is overpowered in current DPP OU, then I think you have no idea what you're talking about. And that's not an insult towards anyone in particular. It's just that I think it's a lot of herd mentality nonsense, because I think the flip from, oh my god, Stall's pretty much unviable, Clefable sucks, to, oh my god, Stall's overpowered, we gotta get rid of Clefable, this thing is, yeah. Yes, but this video is not about that. So why am I bringing all that up then? Well, in this rush to neuter Stall somehow, another option has been posited, and that is to unban Salamence, and that's what this video is about. Now, I do not believe in unbanning something broken if it keeps something else potentially broken in check. That's backwards. It's extremely backwards. Because then it's just... I feel like I shouldn't have to explain why that's chaotic and silly, right? Oh, we have this broken thing. Well, let's add this other broken thing. That'll even it out. If something is broken, then you get rid of that. You don't add something. Anyway, so if stall really was broken, let's just assume, then the choice would not be to unban broken Mence to deal with it. Obviously, I don't think stall is broken, but if it were. So the reason I'm making this Mence video is because there is a chance that it might not be broken independent of whatever stall is doing. It wasn't that. I'm really forcing myself to not go on these tangents. So, yeah, if it's tangentially related, I gotta leave it off to the side. So, Mence might not be broken in the current landscape based on how things have evolved over the decade plus since it's been banned. I was there. I saw it happen. Yeah, so that's what we'll be exploring today. It's similar to Latias in that, Latias was not unbanned to address a certain problem. I mean, coming back to the tier did help out with a lot of things, for sure, but the whole idea behind unbanning Latias was, as I explained in my, I have a couple videos on Latias's return to DPP OU you can find on the channel if you just scroll for a couple minutes. Yeah, so if Salamence were to be tested or whatever, then it would be in a similar vein. It would be because we believe Mence is no longer broken. So, yeah, that's what we'll be exploring today. So, before we can get into why Mence might not be broken anymore today, then we need to go back through time and look at the history of Mence in Gen 4, and I'm really going to enjoy this. Okay, so Diamond and Pearl, Mence is a good Pokemon for sure. I mean, base 100 speed, vicious Draco Meteor Stab. A lot of people used Specs back then. It had Life Orb for a power boost, so coming from Advanced, that was, all this stuff was enormous. The higher base power moves, the boosting items, it was great. So that was, but it wasn't overbearing because its best physical dragon move was Dragon Claw. It did not yet have Outrage. Matter of fact, that was one of the few things that Dragonite had over it in Diamond and Pearl. The fact it had a Dragon Dance and Outrage. But Dragonite was also, it was also pretty overshadowed because Mence was just a better instant Pokemon. And Mence itself also had competition in the form of a little dragon called Garchomp, who did not have Dragon Dance, but had insanely good speed, and Swords Dance, and, of course, Outrage, and a Stab Earthquake. So, yeah, Garchomp was pretty insane, and was one of Diamond and Pearl's most definitive Pokemon. So, Mence was good then, but it wasn't busted. So, even with that huge base attack and Life Orb and Dragon Dance, then when your stab dragon move is Dragon Claw, then, then things changed because Garchomp was banned at the end of Diamond and Pearl, and then Platinum came around, and with it bestowed move tutors on a bunch of stuff, most famously Bullet Punch on Scizor, which completely changed everything, but almost as famously, or just about as famously, it gave Salamence Outrage. So Mence started doing a lot of really fun stuff with this. The first thing, of course, was, well, now its Dragon Dance set has the Face Melter that is DD Outrage from base 135 attack and Life Orb. But it could also use it on a mix set because, Draco Meteor, I mean, if you have not been around for generations without fairy types, then let me tell you, dragon types were kind of a big deal, as only steels resist them. So you could do like the thing that kids do when they just put stab moves on their Pokemon. You could do that with dragons. And Salamence was the best example because you would run Draco Meteor and Outrage on the mix set. Actually, you could even do that on the DD set. There was a mixed DD variant. You would Draco Meteor early game, and then late game you would DD and Outrage. It could really do whatever it wanted. It was absolutely nuts. There was bulky DD Mence too, to shrug off Scizor's bullet punches, or to, roost on Swampert ice beams and then take the next one. It could run physical and special defensive bulky DD. Crazy stuff. But yeah, that was not what made Salamence broken in the eyes of many. It was, number one, DD Outrage, number two, Mixed. And the fact it could mix those together made it even stronger. And a lot of people called it Guess Mence, because you had to guess what set it was. And you would say, oh, well, you could just, surmise from the team composition what set this. Yeah, okay. And then a good player turns that against you, and you could not understand that. And the biggest thing was that even if you knew what Mence set it was, which is a big if, and even if you got the prediction right, another big if, then you were still taking enormous damage at bare minimum. I mean, this, the whole Draco Meteor thing is that it slams resist pretty hard. So at best you survive for a turn, at worst you lose a Pokemon, or at, second worst you lose a Pokemon. At third worst you just lose the entire game because it DDs and destroys you. Because DD on base 100 speed with something this strong, I mean, it threw speed tiers out of whack. I mean, nowadays you can do things like run Scarf Rotom and be like, oh, well, I'm fighting against DD Knight. That was one of the hugest developments post-Mence ban. Oh, now if they have a DD Dragon, then I can cover it with my Scarf Rotom because it's not going to be outrun like it outruns DD, like DD Mence outruns it. I lost the wording there, but you get the idea. So yeah, DD and Mixed, or both, or it was just a monster. And I already explained the conundrum. So, I mean, and it was even better based on the fact that it could be paired with Magnezone because you remove Skarm, and if Skarm doesn't have lefties, then I mean, Mence could just dispatch it itself because it could run DD Fire Blast. It could everything you could use to try and dispatch Mence, it could turn it against you. You try to revenge kill it with Scizor, oh, there's Magnezone again. It's not just a anti-Scar machine. And it didn't exactly need Magnezone. It didn't need to be a sweeper. It could be a wall breaker. It could do it all. So there was an exaggeration around the time of the Platinum into Heart Gold and Soul Silver metagames that OU was 3 Dragon, 3 Steel. Because the Draco bombing of Latias and Salamence was just immense. And then you had a Flygon and Kingdra, but so the 3 Dragon thing was a little exaggerated. But it got a boost in Heart Gold and Soul Silver when Dragonite got Extreme Speed and became one of the best leads. So, but yeah, the people were running 2 Steel types a lot, sometimes 3, which is again not unheard of now, but it was like 9 mandatory then. And Scizor was the number 1 Pokemon in usage. Which is tough to imagine nowadays. But back then it was just like fact, like, yeah, OU is the Scizor tier. Mence was not behind. Yeah, and as the metagame progressed, and a lot of people were saying, hey, I think this Salamence thing, it might be a problem for the reasons mentioned. So, and it famously dissected Stall because of the whole... Draco, there are very few things that safely take Draco, and the things that do take Draco are, very vulnerable to its other attacks. So there were 2 forms of Mixed Mence, by the way, because it wasn't just Mixed, and this isn't even counting Mixed DD, because that was, rare, to be fair. There was Classic Mixed Mence, which was Draco, Fire Blast, Brick Break, Roost, and that was classic because you could use, first of all, you used Roost on predicted switches, because one of Mence's downfalls, Stealth Rock weak, Sand, Life Orb, all this recoil, you could outlast it. And then it roosts on a switch, and yikes. It's also classic because it sometimes used that set in Diamond and Pearl. But then New Mixed Mence was when it just got rid of Roost and threw on that double Dragon Stab. So it was Draco, Fire Blast, usually Earthquake over Brick Break, because the Heatran became a lot more popular, and there's no sense in letting it take a hit from you. Yeah, so Draco, Fire Blast, EQ, Outrage was New Mixed Mence, and that became the standard. And so it was, you couldn't even take advantage of it being at -2 anymore because it had that second enormously powerful Dragon Stab for pretty much every situation. So you couldn't, it was very difficult to punish. And then, of course, there's the fact that Mence has Intimidate, so it's not even like it's a complete glass cannon. For that speed of base 100, it's so good at getting turns. And this is why Mixed Knight is nowhere near as overbearing, by the way. I mean, Mixed Knight's a great Pokemon, don't get me wrong. But 100 speed, I mean, you're outrunning offensive Suicunes and Rotoms, and things like Gliscor even. It doesn't sound that impressive, but then you get into a game and you just realize how many more opportunities you get because of it. Mence didn't have a problem with outspeeding even plus speed Heatran, whereas Dragonite has to go plus speed itself, and it does not want to do that. So, because that has a much lower special... Oh, and Mixed Knight's Draco Meteor is also... it has to make a lot of concessions between speed and power and all that stuff. So, yeah, Mence's great speed and Intimidate, and... yeah, so it was devastating in pretty much every single game. So... yeah, so that's where we stood in Platinum, and then Heart Gold and Soul Silver came around and kept going. And at that point, a lot of people were also looking at Latias, and I won't go too much into that because I have a video on Latias. But spikes were everywhere, and this was actually similar. It actually kind of acts as a predecessor to the stall conundrum. I've conundrum in air quotes, but the stall quote unquote conundrum that we have today. Because in Platinum and moving into Heart Gold and Soul Silver, then the metagame went through the semi-stall stage. Spikes were really popular because Skarm was running a lot of special defense, a lot of speed with Taunt. Fortress was really popular. Everyone loved how good Rotom was as a spin blocker. There's a lot of Diamond and Pearl stall teams, Spiritomb or don't use one almost, because Dusknoir was just not good. Gengar was too frail. Yeah, and Rotom was just excellent. Spike's Immune was huge. So a lot of the same team structures that you see today were being used in 2009 in the Platinum metagame. So, and then, of course, when Latias came back, a lot of players' first instincts, including mine, were to try to recreate those because they were really good then. Yeah, that's where we were, and there was a lot of semi-stall. Latias and Mence were good against the style. They were good as a part of the style. And it was very dominant, but it was not exactly overbearing. But what was overbearing was the double Draco bombing of Latias and Mence. And part of what we're going to examine later is if the current metagame would be able to withstand both of them, as opposed to just Mence, in isolation. So, Latias was being looked at because Specs Draco with spikes was just insane, and, you can say, Skarmory, Bronzong, because people weren't really using Clefable then. And, of course, not only are they ruined by Trick, but, Skarmory gets T-bolted even, so... and in fact, Skarmory is a great partner to Latias itself, so people were saying, it's over-centralizing, it's overpowering, Scizor can't even switch into Draco anymore, even with SpDef investment, it's just... yeah. And so the argument that several players have made, including myself, was that Latias was not the broken one, it was broken in conjunction with Salamence, and Salamence was the really broken one. And then when we were arguing for Latias to come back, it was that Latias without Mence to back it up is not nearly as overbearing. And I think the last several years have proven that true. So that is one reason why I'm wary of Mence coming back. I don't really have a stake in it as much, and it'd be interesting, and it doesn't really affect me either way. So if people want to bring it back, so that's another reason I'm making this video. This is not like a persuasive thing either way. Like, don't bring back Mence or bring back Mence. Free Giratina regular for, that'd be fun. But, yeah, this is just a what if. So, the people can make up their own minds on if Mence would be insane or not. So, yeah, we had a lot of these same structures that were being used today, minus Clefable, of course. But we had, Blissey instead, which soaks Draco is a lot better. And hates Trick just as much. And obviously the passive damage thing, but in terms of actually being able to soak up Dracos, then, gets the job done much better. Doesn't have to instantly heal. But then spikes come around, and then you see where the, points of contention were. Scarftar started becoming really popular for Latias, and it could do, fun stuff against Mixed Mence, too. But, you switch into a Brick Breaker and EQ, and, good night. So, And that's if you're using it to check Mence. Oh, and that's if it's mixed, by the way, because if you use Scarftar to switch in as Mence DDs, then, good night. So, yeah, that's, so then Latias was banned, and, you can consult my other videos for that. And then everyone's eyes shifted to Mence. And, I remember the post-Latias, pre-Mence ban metagame. It was actually pretty pleasant. But, I mean, Mence was broken for sure, but it wasn't, complete chaos. Because there was a lot of freedom gained once Latias was gone. People started using Shaman a lot. That was the biggest thing. People were like, oh, with the lesser dragon influence, we can take from UU and start using Fire, Water, Grass cores. And Infernape was much better, and Heatran too. And then, of course, it continued in that direction for a while after Mence itself was banned. But that was the general idea. And it was fine with Mence around. I mean, but the overall consensus was that, look, Mence, with its base 100 speed, it's too strong and versatile for how fast it is. So, yeah, and I mean, people say, oh, well, what about Infernape? Infernape does not have the base power or the base stats, despite its, excellent speed and coverage. Because as great as firefighting as stab combo is, it doesn't beat, the sheer destroy everything of Dragon. So, yeah, Infernape was not running two well, I guess it was running two fighting stabs, sometimes with close combat and Mach Punch, but that's a little bit different. Mach Punch was priority, and Mence was just using two powerful Dragon stabs. So, yeah, so then Mence was eventually determined to be overpowered. Okay, so post-Mence, we keep going that Fire, Water, Grass direction. Stall, also I should mention, I actually don't know how I did mention, I kind of did, but Stall was, even when Stall was threatened by Latias and Salamence together, it not only, managed, but it also thrived. So, very, very famously, like, hard Stall, I'm not even talking semi-Stall, with Scarftar and, fast cleanup options, like, Crunchatize, we had this great team with Subcalm Mine Jirachi. And I think he had a Trick Scarf Starmie too, but it was like a definitive. He also had like Scarm Bliss. It was like definitively a semi-stall team. So it was like, oh well, that has fast options. So that's different. It's like no, like hard stall teams were working really well with these dragons. Earthworm's team, like the classic Goki Earthworm stall team. Didn't even have, because you could say like the KG and Taylor stall variants that guys like Loki and Mop and Goofball were also using. They had Scarf T-Tar. You could say, oh well, that's some form of speed control. We did not call it speed control back then. It was just a fast Pokemon. But nowadays you would call that speed control. But like Goki and Earthworm, especially Earthworm's team. Hippo, Fori, Gara, Blissey, Rotom, Restalk Rotom, not Scarf. Restalk Rotom, Heatran. What's the fastest Pokemon on that? Restalk Rotom, which hits, like 208 uninvested. Maybe you go a couple EVs to outrun, Crocoon with some speed EVs. Yeah, that's nothing. That is dirt slow, and it still thrived. I mean, it was, outright dominant. People were saying, "Oh my God, this stall team is unbreakable. It's unbeatable," and that was with both dragons. And then it got more popular, obviously, with the dragons leaving. But what the metagame did? It adapted because the tools were there. Yeah, I remember post-Mence ban, there was a rumor, I don't think it was ever anything serious, but I heard from several sources, oh my God, Heatran's next. You can't counter it without Vaporeon. I mean, it was really silly. Oh yeah, Vaporeon was popular back then. Those were the days. Vaporeon was like a Mence check-ish. That's how starved the metagame was for Mence answers. It's like, oh yeah, Vaporeon. Oh, it's fine. It takes 1 million from Draco and gets melted by Outrage after, but it's fine. Loses outright to DD Outrage, but it's okay. Yeah, Vaporeon was just a lot more popular back then because it stuffed Special Mixape, which was really rare. If you didn't want to use Latias or you were afraid of Pursuit or whatever. But yeah, Mence was really good. And if I weren't lazy / busy-ish, then maybe I'll do this again in another video. Just a history of Mence destroying things, just like a montage of. Oh, you thought it was going to Draco. Oh, it Fire Blasted. Oh, there goes Scizor, Skarmory. Oh, it Brick Break. There goes your Blissey. Oh, it DD'd and you switched in Scarf Rotom and your entire team died. It's you know, because it wasn't as simple as use a Mence check, because the answer was, okay, what Mence check? You know, what counters Salamence, famously? Cresselia, Lugia, and Porygon 2 can handle DD because it bounces back Intimidate. Yeah, so... Oh, and it dies to Mix, but don't worry about that. But Cresselia and Lugia are the only true Mence counters. And Cresselia doesn't exactly counter Mence in a metagame with Eternal Sandstorm because it can't. And Rest Talk, I mean, you want to talk about exploitable, especially with how good Pursuit was. Anyway, and how Mence was constantly paired with Scizor, and yeah. So Mence was overbearing. It's like, oh, well, you know, use Mamoswine or Weavile. Well, okay, Weavile sucks. Sucked then, continues to suck now. And Mamoswine, okay, great Pokemon, but you can't exactly switch it in, and that was kind of the issue. So after Mence was banned, people were like, all right, well, I'm going to use Dragonite. And what was nice about that was that you could use Dragonite to replace Salamence. You know, you could have pretty much the same team. You would have a Mence-like Pokemon, but without the broken factor. Like, yes, okay, you still did have that dynamic of, all right, well, this team is soft if you get the Draco switch in. I mean, at worst, you Draco and you chunk something really hard. At best, you kill something. But it wasn't as dominant as Mence for, the reasons mentioned before. It's not as fast, and that's huge. It's not, you can't bring it into a half-health Suicune and force it out. That's already insane. That's a huge, huge difference, especially with how popular offensive Suicune was. Draco Meteor was actually effectively stronger than Mence because it could afford a plus special attack nature, whereas Mence usually preferred plus speed, so it was 319 special attack, same as Latias, whereas Mixed Knight could go up to 328. But that came at the cost of a lot of speed EVs, a lot. So, I mean, you couldn't even outrun the Heatran that was everywhere. Mixed Knight also had the superpower over it and extreme speed, so it was different though. The thing was that if you guessed wrong, at worst you lose a poke, but you wouldn't lose the entire game because if Dragonite DD'd, you could still outrun it with good Scarfers. It didn't throw that part of the metagame out of whack. Whereas if Mence DD'd, it's that was the problem. It was like, well, I hope my Scarf Jirachi or Flygon, will win the speed tie. Or I have to use a bad Scarfer that doesn't outrun it. Or that outruns it but is bad. Like, it's like, oh, just use Scarf Azelf. You can't do that without... That's when a Pokemon is broken. Not that it's unmanageable, because, Mega Rayquaza is manageable, technically. But it's when managing it is unreasonable. And that was the stress that Mence placed on the metagame. Too strong, too versatile, too fast, too effective at doing what it did. It got so many opportunities and just, yeah. So Dragonite was, that's when the metagame really hit its stride and felt balanced for a long time because people were saying, it's doing Mence things but without the insanely overpowered factor. So, a lot changed. Latias came back. Actually, before that, Clefable became popular, Nidoqueen became popular, and Latias came back, and Dugtrio left, and movesets changed, obviously. But another non-artificial change that happened was that Stall and Semi-Stall kind of merged, just because for a while Stall... one of the biggest developments was that post-Mence was that bulky Starmie started being used as the spinner on Stall teams because most classic Stall, the Earthworm, KG, Taylor, Goofball, Loki, Mop, Goki thing. Like Earthworm and Goki had Starmie on one variant, but it was alongside Fortress. But most of those Stall teams, the hard Stall, this wasn't like a hard and fast rule or anything, but the general idea was Scarm was on those semi-stall teams with like fast options. I mean, it's like Scarf Rotoms and mixed Mences and stuff. And the distinction between like semi-stall and like bulky offense was often kind of blurred. but generally semi-stall was bulkier. You saw a lot of Blissies there, even on those like more faster, aggressive teams. It's kind of like the style I like in Advance, where you have like a really aggressive team and then you chuck a Blissey on, because that was really popular especially during the Platinum metagame. So yeah, but then hard stall, it was Fortress. It was all about hazard dominance, as in, I'm going to have my hazards and I'm going to get rid of yours. And then post Mence, Heatran became really, I mean, it was already popular, but it became the new number one. It eclipsed Scizor. And the most popular Heatran set was a Stealth Rock variant. And when your opponent's Stealth Rocker is Heatran, then trying to get rocks off with Fortress is going to be a prolonged, painful process. And this is difficult when one of your most important walls is Rest Talk Gyarados. And that was a stall staple, which is pretty much non-existent today. And I'll explain how it got non-existent. But we have to take it step by step. So when you're relying on Rest Talk Gyarados to wall stuff, I mean, with rocks off, Rest Talk Gyarados is nearly immortal. Don't get me wrong. The problem was that, post Mence, Heatran becomes a lot more popular. Stealth Rock Heatran is everywhere, and it's really easy to keep pressure on stall when you have such free rocks. So, one of the developments to deal with that was that, Starmie was already becoming a lot more popular because it semi-competed for a team slot with Latias. But, only semi, but, still. That typing and speed and all that stuff. So Bulky Starmie became popular because it completely dominated standard Stealth Rock Heatran. And that stall started moving in that direction, where it would be, hard stall still, or, the lines are blurred. Like, team styles, team genres are a fickle thing sometimes. But yeah, it started moving away from the Fortress Rest Talk Gyara thing and more towards the Skarmory Starmie thing. In a lot of guises, but that was the general idea. So, I should also mention, post Latias and especially post Mence, Scarftar fell off hard. Because, okay, when I say fall off, I don't mean it disappear. It was still used on plenty of great teams. I mean, the classic stall team, it's still used for a lot of stuff, like especially Gengar, whose sub-split set was a complete terror at the time. And just general speed control. It was forcing Lucario, alongside Gengar actually, was forcing Lucario to run Bullet Punch on SD sets, or it would be checked by that, for just as one example. But yeah, Scarftar was taking, a bit of a hit. So then Bulky Starmie enjoyed that. And then the metagame moved towards, Skarm and Starm and, and that's when Scarftar started popping back up again. I would never call it underrated, but it definitely enjoyed a little bit of a resurgence, especially because people were really liking using DD and stuff. So people were like, oh, Scarf, I haven't seen that since Mence, Yeah, so then we had the Skarm, Star, Scarftar, Rotom. I mean, those four were on a lot of teams. And then you fill it out with like Hippos and Blissies and Rotoms and Gliscors and Jirachis and Heatrans and whatever you like. So, yes, there was that. And then people were starting to get into the whole, oh, well, we have this pursuit dynamic against, we want to pursuit the Starmie so we can maintain our hazards. We want to pursuit the opposing Rotom so we can spin away their hazards. And it became the whole, like, hazard dominance thing, where, I will have all my hazards and you will have none of yours. And, of course, that can be kind of exhausting, contentious to go through for a long time, because a lot of those moves are not super clear on how you should handle them. And not that those team styles are bad or anything, but some players were trying to... we started moving in the direction of, what if you could make a stall team that didn't care how many hazards the opposing team had? And that's where you started to see things like Earthworm and Heist teams with Bronzong and Clefable, and Gliscor and stuff like that. So you could, the Rise of Clef. Again, I have a Rise of Clef video, which, similar to the Latias one, if you want to know more about that. But that kind of approach, at first it was just like, oh, that's that weird balance team that Earthworm and Heist like to use. But then it was, more, and this was not entirely novel on stall. Like, Zac91 in the Platinum era had a stall team with 5 Spike Immune Pokemon and the Blissey. Bronzong, Skarmory, Rotom, Gliscor... Did I say Latias? Bronzong, Skarmory, Rotom, Gliscor, Latias, Blissey. And then in the Latias metagame, several players were like, hey, what if you use that but with Clefable over Blissey, and then you have 6 Spikes immune Pokemon? And it's a great team. I mean, it has its flaws, like something like Taunt Will with Gengar is a pain, but like it's nothing super unmanageable or anything. So you can get around, and it's a great set of Pokemon in general. And I mean, it struggles with like Trick and stuff like that, but obviously every team has its flaws, and overall the general idea of being so resilient to spikes, I mean literally being unaffected whether the opponent has 0 layers or 3 layers, is pretty astounding. So yeah, I look back at that old Zach team and think, man, that he was ahead of the curve. He also had an overpowered Gliscor, but that's something else. Yeah, no more Sandvale running around now. Anyway, so yeah, that kind of informed a lot of the newer stall teams, like the ones that Heist and I were messing around with. The ones that, I mean, at first there was like Starmie and Clef on the same team, but then it was like, why do you have to play these Scarftar games with Starmie when you could just ditch it and not care about hazards? First on balance, and then just on stallier stuff, as Nidoqueen started being popular, thanks to guys like Heist and Fatty / Brufasa. And AB2 were actually, there were a lot more players using Nidoqueen, but those were the guys I was hanging around with at the time. That was when it was like an underrated pick. Like, oh hey, by the way, Nidoqueen's really cool, right? Walls Lucario, T Spikes, Wall Subtoxic Zapdos. Oh my God, Subtoxic Zapdos was such a pain. Things like that. And then I started with Heist messing around with Nido Clef Stall. And I remember the early days. Oh, Nido Clef Stall. What is this flavor of the month garbage? All that stuff. And but that really, as we know now, then that style of stall, the aggressive, I'm just going to stack my own stuff and not care about the opposing hazards as much. And it's also very aggressive because it combines that with fast Pokemon, because you can use Scarf Rotom. That's another post-Mence development. Not that Scarf Rotom wasn't used before, but you can use Scarf Rotom without having to go out of your way to include a DD Mence check. Because a lot of the Scarf Rotom teams of today, they would be on paper DD Mence weak, because they don't have like a true physical wall like the likes of Hippo and Restalk Gara, or like even Swampert that can take a hit from +1 Mence if at good health. So, but with Scarf Rotom, then you don't have to worry about that on paper DD Mence or DD Night weak, because you can just outrun it with your Scarf Rotom. Yeah, obviously, if a team doesn't have Scarf Rotom and it has Scarf Tar, then you can still deal with DD Night through other ways, like Scarm, because number one, DD Fire Blast Night is a lot rarer because its special attack is so much lower than Mence's naturally, so its uninvested Fire Blast doesn't scare Scarm as much. And you can even use Nidoqueen kind of to step in because of that great bulk and Ice Beam, and in general, the on-paper weak of these Dragon Flying types is offset by their rocks and sand, their passive damage weakness. Especially because if they don't run Life Orb, they don't have power, and if they do run Life Orb, then they get KO'd a lot more quickly. So, yeah, and that style of stall is a lot more aggressive because it's not, I don't know if this is the right word, I wouldn't say fragile, but like those Starmie stall teams, or especially the 4E stall teams, which is why they fell out of favor. They really, if you could keep rocks up against them, that felt like half the battle almost, because you could pressure them a lot more easily with double switches. Whereas these newer styles of stall, and by newer I mean the platinum styles, but with an added Clefable, then you could pressure them with some double switches with rocks up. Actually, the semi-stall styles back then, they had the same trait, where you couldn't just double switch on them a couple times and suddenly they'd be. That was like a development that then went undeveloped again as people realized, I don't really like that I'm under so much pressure if I can't keep rocks off. So, yeah, that more aggressive, I guess I can summarize it like this. Hard stall adopting the traits of semi-stall, as in hazard resilience and a more aggressive play style. That made stall even more difficult to deal with. Borat a long time ago said of GSC stall that there's nothing scarier than an aggressively played stall team, because then you shut the window on your opponent way harder. And that kind of influence can be seen in today's, and I guess in old DPP semi-stall, which laid the blueprint for modern DPP stall. Lines being blurred. It's aggressive and it's resilient. and it's you can't overwhelm it by stacking a bunch of hazards, and because for a long time in the 2010s, then a lot of overwhelming stall. I made a lot of teams and the point was to overwhelm Starmie, because if you could get those hazards, maintain those hazards in the face of Starmie, because Starmie was insanely popular, and a lot of people couldn't make teams without Starmie, and it was hard to not crutch on it because it just did so much, and it was difficult to mess around with it for a long time. And if you could get those hazards, get past that Starmie, then that was a big step, almost half the battle again. So, and now you have these stall teams that aren't resilient to hazards, and are resilient to hazards, and you can't just double switch on them a couple times, and suddenly they're looking real vulnerable. So that development, that aggressive play, that aggressive approach, is what has a lot of players, including me, thinking, if Mence came back today, it would not be just as good a stall killer as it was before. That's my first instinct anyway, because Mixed Knight is still very threatening to these teams. Mixed Flygon is very threatening to these teams. But of course, players are thinking, we're better equipped now to deal with. It's kind of a Latias thing, where people were saying, Latias felt overbearing at the time, but we weren't using all the checks we could have. We know more now. We have, Clefable's popular, different variants of Bronzong, Jirachi, bulkier T-Tar, stuff like that. And then, that was true. We had the tools to deal with Latias. And that's why it hasn't been broken since it came back. So it just took a little bit of adaptation, whatever. So the question is, do we have the tools to deal with Salamence if it were to come back? Would it be overbearing? Now, I'm sure it'd be fun. During the points, when Dugtrio was contentious, then there was a Salamence tournament hosted. And that was in the Doug metagame, which had some real calamitous points. And Salamence wasn't as overbearing. That was with Doug around. So without Doug, constricting things, then it would probably be easier, for sure. Question is, though, I'm still uncertain, and the only way to really be certain is to let Salamence loose for a big tournament. So SPL pretty much. So that's the only way you will really. I mean, you can run like a suspect. I would enjoy a Salamence suspect ladder. It would be fun to play on, if nothing else. And if it's overpowered, it's overpowered. You didn't lose anything. And you can run some small tournaments. And then after those, if you decide this is worth testing for one SPL, then that's cool. But that's pretty much how you would have to do it. That's how it was done with Latias. Yeah. So now we ask, do we have the tools to deal with Mence? Because, I mean, rock, sand, life orb, those arguments were thrown around over a decade ago. And, I mean, yeah, Mence is still really fast, really strong, really diverse in how it can mess you up. And, yeah, I don't know. So my instinct would be that it would be a bit much. I mean, no harm in testing it, obviously, and I'm not really affected either way, but I personally think that it might be a bit much, but, we could be wrong. We would be better off handling it now, because, but the thing was that Mence was never just a stall killer. That's the whole thing. Its speed makes it good against every style of team. Let's just look at some team styles. Hyper offense teams become devastating with Salamence. If you get DD with Mence on hyper offense instead of Dragonite, good God. I mean, for me, that was the biggest thing. It wasn't like the guess Mence thing. I mean, that was big too. But it was the fact that DD on its own was just too much because of that speed and that power. The whole thing about how it messes up the Scarf aspect of revenge killing it, withstanding its hits, is nearly impossible. Switching, priority, it's not the most reliable thing in the world, especially when it resists good old Mach Punch. Scizor has never been lower, not since the Diamond and Pearl days. Scizor, I'm sure it'd come back in some sense, but it's hardly a great answer. Same with like Mamoswine or something. And yeah, you get more E-speeds from Lukes and maybe D-Knights, but I don't know, I think it would be a bit much just for DD alone. And then you throw in the instant wreckage of Mix. That'd be a lot. I mean, just think about how it messes up the whole Scarf Rotom dynamic. And I think the being able to Scarf with Rotom dynamic was one of the healthiest aspects of the post-Mence ban metagame that was alluded to earlier. Whew, what a trip down memory lane, huh? Anyway, I mean, you can even, this hasn't been done in a while, but a thing that was going on for some time was that you could even Scarf with Heatran and cover most D-Deers. Not T-Tar because you can't hurt it, but you could outspeed them because D-Knight pretty much needs Adamant for the power. I mean, Jolly D-Knight is also, like, fine, obviously, but it's another... Whereas Salamence... You don't think that extra base attack matters, but then you look at some of the calcs and how it pushes over the edge, especially in a game of inches like Pokemon is. Or game of centimeters, sorry. Yeah, and it can... and the thing is that... Mence can run Jolly and mess up your whole Scarf thing, and if it wants to run Adamant, then it's brutal with power. Whereas even if Dragonite runs Jolly, and then it still doesn't mess up your Scarf speed metagame. That's the thing, and that's why most people go, oh well, I'm just gonna Adamant with D-Knight because not really different. And that's why a lot of people got away with using Scarf Tran. And then there were some players who were punished for that, obviously. But that's like a much healthier dynamic than because if you're relying on Scarf Tran for D-Deers, then that's something else. But yeah, that's the basic gist of. I think Mence would be a little much. I think. Oh, did my computer charger fell out? Yeah, I think Mence would be a bit much, and I mean, we don't even know how. I mean, it would be interesting to find out. But I'm interested if people with how Blissey is so much less common, I think we would see an uprise in specs actually. And now that I'm mentioning specs, and that was the other thing I wanted to say, I think maybe Mence on its own would not be too much, but Mence and Latias together, that I'm not sure of. I'm not sure that the metagame has adapted to the point where. Yes, and this is what I was mentioning, post Latias with only Mence, yeah, that was actually pretty good. It wasn't nearly as difficult to handle Mence without Latias also ripping everything up. But Mence itself was also pretty busted then. So if we didn't have Latias and it was just Mence coming back, then I'd say, okay, maybe. But I would say, well, if you're going to unban one of those two dragons, it should be Latias because it helps out with a lot of the defensive holes in the metagame. That was one of the arguments. Latias isn't broken, and it gives us a lot of defensive holes. Like a lot of... that's another reason why the stall being strong argument is always weird to me. Because a couple of years ago, there was in a similar vein to stall sucks, JK, it's overpowered. Then a couple of years ago, there was this, you have to guess last in DPP, and the metagame's way too strong for that. And I thought it was nonsense then, without Latias. But one of the arguments that I made for Latias was, okay, if you believe in this nonsense about the randomness of guessing last or whatever, then you should want Latias back, because the fact it covers so much defensively it helps against that. It helps keep so much of the metagame in check. We should want that if the metagame is supposedly so random and volatile, which it wasn't. But either way, you should enjoy this increased defensive presence it brings and being able to keep things in check. And that kind of got rolled over in favor of, oh my god, it walls everything, it's too broken. Let's go back to the metagame where I have to guess last and I don't have the options for it. Allegedly anyway. I mean, this kind of like herd mentality flip-flopping is like, oh, Clefable's a flavor of the month, so, oh, Clefable's broken. Or another favorite, oh my god, hazards are so broken. Oh my god, Clefable's not affected by hazards, it's so broken. This is why I had to step away, because those arguments will drive you insane. But yeah, so the metagame is more aggressive, passive damage everywhere, blah, but I think Mence on its own would be a bit much, and if not on its own, then definitely in conjunction with Latias. Yeah, and I don't think we should get rid of Latias to bring Mence back. And I don't think, and I definitely don't think we should have both dragons in the tier at the same time. But, and this is just me speaking from a personal standpoint, I love the Latias Salamence metagame. It's possibly my favorite ever. I think I've mentioned that in a couple of videos. I probably have. Whether it was like perfectly balanced or whatever, so part of it is nostalgia. Part of it is, I go back and watch games from that period sometimes, and I'm just like, this was a great metagame. Was it as, fully optimized and balanced as like current DPP? Okay, probably not in terms of things being broken. But if we were to go back to that metagame, I'd be okay with it. I think it's a skill promoting metagame, like many others. So it would hardly be the end of the world if we were to put Mence back in with Latias. So, just to reiterate, I think Mence on its own is a little much. I think Mence alongside Latias is, a little more much. But even if we were to bring both back, that'd be cool. So even though, if from my objective standpoint of we must do what's best for the DPP metagame, which I also believe in, then I would say, don't bring Mence back. That it's too strong. But yeah, that was pretty much it. So I think, wow, the video did not go on as long as I expected it to. I'm sure I'll be back with a montage of Mence just Dracoing and fire blasting and earthquaking and outraging and DDing and roosting and wishing. Maybe we'd see some more wish Mences. That'd be awesome. Yeah. So let's see. Is there anything else? Yeah, I mean, another development, I guess, is that people like to use these fast Jirachis now on the semi-stall. I mean, again, that was before, too. We had mixed Jirachi, we had sub-call mine Jirachi, we had Super Rachi on these teams, and, that doesn't... the fact it's a speed tie at best is what makes it kind of scary. Earthworm used to use Scarf Tentacruel. I mean, that was because Earthworm used everything and succeeded with it. But that base 100 speed to at worst tie with DD Mence was a big part of it. Yeah. So, I mean, even things like think about how Scarf Lucario is popular in DPP now. You're not using Scarf Lucario unless your team is solid against DD Mence. And as established, it's really hard to be solid against DD Mence alone. I mean, that's the whole Mence conundrum. It's even if you don't know what's coming, it's destructive, and even if you do know what's coming, it's destructive. I sound like I'm writing a false swipe video, but it's so true. I mean, because people are talking about how Scarf Lucario is so great, it does all this stuff, and I agree. But I mean, be prepared to lose that, or like Scarf Metagross even. I mean, be prepared to lose all these cool Scarfers if you want to deal with Mence again, and for the sake of what? Being able to better handle stall team. I mean, okay, here's another reason why that line of thinking is stupid. Okay, so let's assume stall's broken. And let's assume that you bring Mence back. So, if you don't use Mence on your team, are you vulnerable to losing to stall? I mean, that's a little bit oversimplified, right? But that's the basic idea. Stall's overpowered, we bring back Mence, and I get you can say, oh, well, Mence will cause stall to, lose foot in the metagame. Number one, I still don't think that's accurate. Number two, I mean, so you answer broken with the... Now, if Mence... And that's the thing. If Mence really isn't broken, then you should want it back regardless of how it does against stall. So, stall's popularity, or alleged brokenness or whatever, should have nothing to do with bringing Mence back. And also, I think Mence would still terrorize... I do think Mence would terrorize stall. Mence terrorizes everything. That was the whole point. It was, it ripped through everything. I mean, I don't know. This is, I trust the people in charge of DPP now. I'm no longer part of that. But, I'm glad I stepped back. But sometimes I want to just step in and be like, can you guys get this, whole unbanned Mence crusade, to go away? Because, Jesus Christ. But, I mean, this is why you have to not take the loud shouting pop, because what was one of the biggest things people said would die out if Latias came back? Oh, you can't bring back Latias. Zapdos will die out. Zapdos will be bad, and that is such a hilariously wrong statement that Yeah. Um, so it's more stuff in that vein that, yeah. So to reiterate, stall is fine. Mence would probably be a bit much, but I mean, who knows? And if the worst case is the Latias Salamence metagame, I think that's pretty good. And I mean, you can always just go back and fix it. Yeah, I mean, people are clamoring for some sort of ban in DPP every year, and it's always different. I mean, sometimes it doesn't matter. Like Dugtrio really was ridiculous, but like it was not that long ago that people really wanted to ban Breloom. I'll just leave it at that. Oh yeah, people wanted to unban Latias and Mence to deal with Breloom. Breloom would still be great, by the way, if Mence came back. Breloom would be outstanding, just as outstanding as it is now. Yeah, as for other claims of how to fix DP, the only one I'm at all sympathetic to is banning Rachi because RNG and stuff, but I view Rachi as more of a DD Tar Arrow Rock Slide in advance situation. It's I think what it shapes the tier into is good. Like again, you want to not deal with that whole alleged randomness of DPP stuff, then you should want Pokemon like Latias and Jirachi. Now, if they're so over-centralizingly powerful that you have to use them or be worse off for it, a la something like Genesect, then that's something else. But I think it's very clear that that is not the case. It's very far from the case, even. Because I do not think Jirachi is mandatory at all. And I think the success of a lot of Jirachi-less teams proves... And you don't even have to look at results, because results-oriented thinking and analysis in a game like Pokemon can often be really silly and misleading. But if you're just looking at how a team is built, then there are plenty of teams where you don't think, oh, I need Jirachi. Yeah. And also, to go back to Mence, that whole dynamic of, let's assume Stall is broken, let me bring Mence back. Okay, but, even if you assume that Stall will, die out if Mence comes back, right? Or it'll be forced to change or be less strong or whatever, then you're introducing a dynamic where, okay, if I don't bring Mence, then I am risking myself to a matchup loss against Stall, because, it's broken against everything that doesn't have Mence. I mean, again, a little oversimplified, but that's the general idea, that the current metagame, no Mence, Stall overpowered. Bring back Mence, you have this one tool that will make Stall less overpowered, so if you don't bring Mence, then you have... You see why that's not a good way to look at how to fix a problem? If Stall is really that overpowered, focus on Stall. Don't bring back something to try and neuter it, because that's when you start introducing real cases of matchup and all sorts of stupid team building restraints. And that is way unhealthier than any one... Okay, I guess if any one Pokemon is causing it, then... So, I'm tripping over my words at this point because I've been yammering for an hour. But, yeah, if Mence is... I would be interested to see Mence come back, but I do not think it would be because of Stall. Maybe I'll title this video, Salamence versus Stall or something. No, I won't. It's just going to be what if Mence returned to DPP or something. But the Stall thing is very relevant. Also, I would once again cite the success of the hardest of Stall teams, which were hazard vulnerable at that. Slow and hazard vulnerable, aka, very easy to take advantage of. They still thrived in the Lottie Mence era. So if you think, oh my god, Stall's overpowered, and bringing back Salamence will fix this, then I think you'd be disappointed. Stall's still gonna be around and very, very good, even if Mence is to come back. Alright, so I am looking forward to that Salamence Draco montage, though. So I think I've said everything I want to at this stage. It was fun to go down memory lane, and yeah, I didn't have to look up anything. I just remembered. It's nice sometimes. You don't want to do it too much, though. That's a good way to take away from the here and now. But once in a while, you got to kick back. So, let's see. Oh, some other suspects that people have said, oh, what if we tested Mew or Manaphy in DPP? And to that, I'm going to say no. Definitely not. Maybe that'll have its own video too, but like Mew would be Mew's an interesting one. Maybe I'll do that next. But yeah, I think Mew would be a bit much. But Mence, bring it back or don't bring it back, but don't do it to deal with stall. But either way, I'd enjoy seeing Mence again, even if only for a little while. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you again next time.